You are the architect of your own misery. Yes, you. Sitting there, consuming this content, probably hoping for some magical insight that will fix your life without you having to change a single thing about how you think, how you act, or how you surrender your power to worry every single day. But here's what Michel de Montaigne understood in his tower in 16th century France, something you refuse to accept. You are not the victim of your circumstances. You are the willing participant in a psychological prison you've built brick by brick, worry by worry, fear by fear. And the most devastating truth, you prefer it this way. You've convinced yourself that worry is wisdom, that anxiety is awareness, that mental rehearsal of catastrophe is preparation. But let me tell you what it really is. It's cowardice disguised as responsibility. It's paralysis masquerading as planning. It's the elaborate psychological theater you perform to avoid the terrifying simplicity of actually living. Montaigne wrote, "My life has been filled with terrible misfortune, most of which never happened." But he didn't write this as a victim. He wrote it as a man who had discovered something revolutionary about human psychology, something that would take modern science centuries to catch up to, something you still refuse to acknowledge, even when it's staring you in the face every morning in the mirror. You see, Montaigne understood what we now call the negativity, bias, our brain's primitive tendency to scan for threats, to catastrophize, to worry about events that exist only in our imagination. But unlike you, he didn't just identify the problem, he found the antidote. The antidote wasn't positive thinking. It wasn't meditation apps or productivity hacks or the endless stream of self-help content you consume like intellectual junk food. It was something far more dangerous. To your comfortable misery, complete psychological surrender. And this terrifies you, doesn't it? The idea that you might have to let go of the mental management system you've spent decades perfecting. The possibility that all your careful planning, all your anxious preparation, all your worried analysis might not just be useless but actually counterproductive. When was the last time you went a full day without worrying? When was the last time you made a decision without first running it through the exhausting mental simulation of everything that could go wrong? You can't remember, can you? Because worry has become your identity. It's how you feel productive without actually producing anything. It's how you feel responsible without taking any real responsibility. It's your psychological security blanket, uncomfortable but familiar. You've made worry into a virtue. You wear your anxiety like a badge of honor, proof that you care deeply about outcomes. You compete with others over who's more stressed, who has more on their plate, who's more aware of potential problems. But what you're really competing over is who's more skilled at avoiding the present moment, who's more accomplished at living in imaginary futures filled with imaginary disasters. Montaigne called this the disease of the mind. But here's what he understood, that this disease isn't happening to you. You are actively choosing it, moment by moment, thought by thought. You are the doctor prescribing your own poison, the jailer locking your own cell, the executioner sharpening your own blade. And the most insidious part, you've convinced yourself that this psychological prison is actually protection. You believe that your constant mental vigilance is keeping you safe, that your anxious preparation is preventing catastrophe, that your worried analysis is solving problems. But look at your life. Really look at it. How many of your worries have actually prevented problems? How many of your anxious preparations have made real challenges easier to handle? The answer is none. Zero. Your worry has never prevented a single real problem. It has only prevented you from being present when real solutions were needed. Let me tell you what's really happening in your psychological landscape and why you're so resistant to letting go of worry. You worry because deep down, you believe that mental rehearsal of catastrophe somehow prevents it. This is what psychologists call magical thinking, the primitive belief that your thoughts can influence external reality. It's the same psychological mechanism that makes children believe monsters won't attack if they hide under blankets. that makes gamblers believe they can influence slot machines with special rituals, that makes you believe rehearsing disaster somehow prevents it. Montaigne saw through this delusion 400 years ago when he wrote, "There is nothing more notable in Socrates than that he found time, when he was an old man, to learn music and dancing, and thought it time well spent." Here was the wisest man in Athens, facing his own execution, and what was he doing? Learning to dance. Not because he was irresponsible, but because he understood something you don't: the present moment is the only place where real life happens. While you're busy mentally preparing for disasters, life is happening. While you're rehearsing conversations that will never occur, real conversations are passing you by. While you're solving imaginary problems, real opportunities are dissolving. Your worry isn't protecting you, it's suffocating your capacity to respond authentically to what's actually in front of you. Here's an uncomfortable truth that will make you want to close this video and go back to scrolling. You don't actually want to stop worrying. Worry gives you something to do with your mental energy. It makes you feel important, needed, responsible. It provides structure to your inner life, even if that structure is built from anxiety and fear. Without worry, you'd have to face the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, life doesn't require your constant mental management. You'd have to confront the reality that most of what you consider preparation is actually procrastination, that most of what you call planning is actually avoidance, that most of what you think is responsibility is actually a sophisticated form of control addiction. Montaigne understood this when he wrote about the fear of death, not literal death, but the death of the ego that believes it's in control. You cling to worry the same way you cling to any addiction, because the withdrawal from the familiar, even when it's painful, feels more dangerous than the pain itself. The devil you know feels safer than the angel you don't. But here's what you're not seeing: that safety is an illusion. Your worry hasn't made you safer, it's made you smaller. It hasn't protected you from harm, it's prevented you from fully living. It hasn't prepared you for challenges, it's made you less capable of handling them when they actually arise. In our culture, worry has become a virtue signal. We compete over who's more stressed, who has more on their plate, who's more aware of potential problems. You've learned that expressing anxiety gets you sympathy, that sharing your worries makes people think you're thoughtful, that broadcasting your stress makes others believe you're working hard. Montaigne called this the comedy of social masks, the performance we put on to convince others and ourselves that we're important, needed, indispensable. But what kind of society have we created where anxiety is currency, where stress is status, where worry is proof of worth? You've become an actor in this bizarre theater, playing the role of the concerned person, the responsible worrier, the anxious achiever. And you've played this role so long you've forgotten it's just a performance. You've confused the mask with your face, the character with your identity, the performance with your personality. But what if I told you that your worry isn't making you more responsible, it's making you less capable? What if your constant mental preparation for catastrophe is actually preventing you from responding skillfully to real challenges when they arise? What if all that anxious energy you're spending on imaginary problems is exactly the energy you need for real solutions? Here's something else you don't want to admit: you're addicted to the drama of worry. Your anxious thoughts provide entertainment for your mind, even if that entertainment is painful. Worry gives you something to think about, problems to solve, scenarios to analyze. It's mental junk food, immediately stimulating, but ultimately depleting. Think about it. When you're not worried about something, what happens? Boredom, emptiness, the uncomfortable silence of a mind that doesn't know what to do with itself when it's not busy managing imaginary crises. So you find something new to worry about. You manufacture problems to give your mind something to chew on. Montaigne called this the restlessness of the human condition, He understood that most people would rather suffer from thinking too much than risk the apparent emptiness of thinking clearly. They prefer the familiar chaos of mental noise to the unfamiliar peace of mental clarity. Here's what terrifies you most about Montaigne's philosophy of surrender. If you stop worrying, who are you? Without the constant mental chatter of anxiety, without the familiar drama of anticipating problems, without the comfortable identity of being someone who cares deeply about outcomes, what remains? This is what Montaigne called the encounter with the void, the moment when you realize that most of what you consider your personality is actually just habitual mental patterns, psychological defenses, unconscious reactions to imaginary threats. The moment when you discover that the voice in your head that never stops commenting, analyzing, worrying, planning isn't actually you, it's just mental noise you've mistaken for identity. And this void, it's not empty, it's not depressing, it's not the absence of something important. It's full of possibility. But possibility requires uncertainty, and uncertainty requires surrender. And surrender requires the death of the part of you that believes it's in control. You'd rather suffer in familiar patterns than risk the unknown territory of authentic presence. You'd rather live in the psychological prison you understand than step into the freedom you can't predict or control. You'd rather be a prisoner you recognize than a person you've never met. Here's what you need to understand, and this might be the most important thing anyone has ever told you: the system that keeps you worried, anxious, mentally spinning isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. And you are not its victim, you are its willing participant. Consumer culture needs you worried about your appearance, your status, your security. It needs you believing that the next purchase will solve your anxiety, that the right product will finally give you peace, that external acquisition can fill internal emptiness. Your worry about not having enough, not being enough, not doing enough drives the entire economy of unnecessary consumption. Political systems need you afraid of the other side, worried about threats real and imagined, anxious about changes you can't control. Your fear makes you easy to manipulate. Your anxiety makes you eager for simple solutions to complex problems. Your worry makes you willing to surrender freedom in exchange for the illusion of security. Social media needs you anxious about your image, your likes, your relevance. It needs you constantly comparing your inner experience to others' external presentations, worried about being left out, missing out, falling behind. Your social anxiety feeds the attention economy, turning your insecurity into corporate profits. The news media needs you worried about everything: crime rates, economic collapse, health scares, political upheaval, social breakdown. Your worry is their business model. The more anxious you are, the more likely you are to consume their content, seeking information that will either validate your fears or provide temporary relief from them. Your worry isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. You're not a victim of anxiety culture, you're a willing participant, a co-conspirator, a customer who keeps coming back for more of what's making you sick. Every time you choose worry over presence, catastrophic thinking over curiosity, mental rehearsal over authentic response, you're voting for the continuation of your own psychological imprisonment. And the most insidious part? You think you're being responsible. You think your worry proves you care. You think your anxiety demonstrates your awareness. You think your mental management shows your maturity. But what it really shows is how thoroughly you've been colonized by a culture that profits from your psychological suffering. Montaigne saw this clearly when he withdrew from public life to his tower. He wasn't escaping society, he was refusing to let society's anxiety colonize his mind. He wasn't being irresponsible, he was taking the ultimate responsibility for his own psychological state. He wasn't running away from problems, he was refusing to participate in the mass creation of imaginary ones. But let me guess what you're thinking, right? Now, easy for Montaigne to say he was wealthy. He had a tower. He didn't have my responsibilities. He didn't have my job, my family, my financial pressures, my health concerns, my social obligations. He could afford to be philosophical because he didn't have real problems. This is projection. You're projecting your psychological patterns onto external circumstances. You're rationalizing your attachment to worry by making it seem necessary, noble, unavoidable. You're using your circumstances as an excuse to avoid taking responsibility for your mental state. Here's what Montaigne actually had: a life full of uncertainty, political upheaval, religious wars, personal losses, physical illness, financial instability, family drama, social pressure, and professional obligations. The 16th century wasn't a peaceful retreat, it was a time of plague, violence, and chaos. The difference wasn't his circumstances, it was his relationship to uncertainty. He wrote, "I have never seen a greater monster or miracle than myself." This wasn't self-deprecation, it was recognition of the fundamental mystery of human existence, the impossibility of fully understanding or controlling the complexity of being alive. He understood that trying to control the uncontrollable wasn't just futile, it was missing the point entirely. The point isn't to eliminate uncertainty, it's to dance with it. The point isn't to prevent problems, it's to develop the capacity to respond skillfully when they arise. The point isn't to worry your way to safety, it's to find peace in the midst of inevitable insecurity. What's really driving your attachment to worry? Let me tell you, because these unconscious motivations are running your life, whether you acknowledge them or not. If you're not constantly anticipating problems, are you really needed? If you're not always prepared for disaster, are you really contributing? If you're not perpetually concerned about outcomes, do you really care? Worry makes you feel important, like you're contributing something valuable to the world. But you're not contributing, you're consuming. You're consuming your own mental energy and the emotional energy of everyone around you. Your worry doesn't help anyone. It doesn't prevent problems. It doesn't prepare you for challenges. It doesn't demonstrate love or responsibility or awareness. It just makes you and everyone around you more anxious, more scattered, more disconnected from what actually matters. Real life requires improvisation, adaptation, response to the unexpected. But improvisation is terrifying when you're addicted to control. Worry gives you the illusion that you can script life in advance, that you can rehearse your way to certainty, that you can think your way out of uncertainty. But life isn't a script, it's jazz. And you can't improvise while you're reading sheet music. You can't respond authentically to what's happening while you're busy rehearsing for what might happen. You can't dance with uncertainty while you're trying to choreograph certainty, trusting something larger than your individual mental management system. This is terrifying for someone who's built their identity around being in control, being prepared, being responsible. It requires acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, the intelligence that grows trees and heals wounds and keeps planets in orbit might be capable of handling your life challenges without constant mental micromanagement. Montaigne called this trusting nature, not in some mystical sense, but in the practical recognition that the same intelligence that coordinates billions of cellular processes in your body every second might be more capable than your anxious mind at navigating the complexity of existence. You worry about what others think because you believe their opinions determine your worth. But whose opinions are you actually worried about? Usually people whose judgment you don't even respect, whose approval wouldn't actually change your life, whose criticism says more about them than about you. Montaigne wrote, "The opinion of others is a powerful party, but it is not the judge. You've made other people's potential reactions the judge of your choices, the editor of your expression, the governor of your behavior. But why? Most people are too busy worrying about their own image to spend much time judging yours. Look around you. Everyone is worried. Everyone is stressed. Everyone is mentally preparing for catastrophe. And you think this makes it normal, healthy, even necessary. This is what psychologists call social proof, the tendency to assume that if everyone is doing something, it must be correct. But what if everyone is wrong? What if the entire culture's relationship to uncertainty is fundamentally dysfunctional? What if we've created a society of mutual anxiety, where everyone's worry feeds everyone else's worry, where collective fear masquerades as collective wisdom? Montaigne understood this when he wrote, "The most universal quality is diversity." The fact that everyone worries doesn't make worry universal, it makes it a shared delusion, a collective addiction, a cultural pathology that we've normalized because it's so widespread. You have the opportunity to be different, but being different requires courage. It requires the willingness to be misunderstood by people who are still trapped in the psychology of worry. It requires the strength to appear irresponsible to people who mistake anxiety for responsibility, uncaring to people who confuse worry with love, naive to people who think pessimism is wisdom. Are you strong enough to be free when everyone around you is choosing imprisonment? Are you brave enough to be present when everyone else is living in imaginary futures? Are you courageous enough to trust when everyone else is controlling? Here's the truth that will either liberate you or send you running back to your comfortable anxiety. You are not in control. You never were. You never will be. And this isn't a problem to solve, it's reality to accept. This might be the most devastating thing you'll ever hear, or the most liberating, your choice. But it's the truth whether you accept it or not. Every moment you spend worrying about outcomes you can't control is a moment stolen from engaging with what you can influence. Every hour spent mentally rehearsing catastrophes is an hour not spent living. Every day spent in anxious preparation for imaginary problems is a day not spent creating real solutions. Montaigne discovered that when he stopped trying to control the uncontrollable, something miraculous happened. He became infinitely more capable of responding skillfully to what was actually happening. When he stopped wasting energy on imaginary problems, he had more energy for real opportunities. When he stopped living in worried futures, he became available to the possibilities of the present moment. This is what he meant when he said, "When you stop worrying, everything starts to go well." Not because external circumstances magically improve, but because your capacity to navigate whatever arises expands exponentially. Not because problems disappear, but because you become more skillful at responding to them. Not because life becomes predictable, but because you become comfortable with unpredictability. So here's your choice. And make no mistake, it is a choice. The most important choice you'll ever make. You can continue living in the psychological prison you've built, furnished with familiar worries, decorated with catastrophic thinking, secured with the illusion of control. You can keep pretending that your mental rehearsal of disasters is protecting you, that your anxiety is evidence of your responsibility, that your worry is proof of your love. You can continue being the architect of your own misery, the director of your own suffering, the author of your own anxiety. You can keep choosing familiar pain over unfamiliar peace, comfortable imprisonment over uncomfortable freedom, known suffering over unknown possibility. Or you can do something genuinely revolutionary. You can stop. Not gradually. Not when conditions are perfect. Not when you've figured out how to stop worrying without risk. Not when you've worried enough to feel like you've earned the right to stop worrying. Now, this moment. While you're listening to these words, stop trying to think your way out of uncertainty. Stop believing that mental preparation can prevent life from being unpredictable. Stop using worry as a substitute for presence, anxiety as a replacement for action, catastrophic thinking as a shield against authentic vulnerability. Stop performing responsibility instead of being responsive. Stop rehearsing for life instead of living it. Stop managing imaginary problems instead of engaging with real opportunities. Stop being a prisoner of your own psychological patterns. The door to your prison is unlocked. It always has been. The key isn't hidden, it's in your hand. The guard isn't forcing you to stay, you're volunteering for imprisonment. The sentence isn't life, it's as long as you choose to serve it. Montaigne spent years in his tower, not hiding from life, but learning how to engage with it without the mediation of worry, without the filter of anxiety, without the constant mental management that most people mistake for living. He discovered that beneath all the mental noise, beneath all the psychological defenses, Beneath all the worry and fear and desperate attempts at control, there was something unshakable, his capacity to respond to whatever arose with curiosity rather than panic, presence rather than projection, engagement rather than avoidance. This capacity exists in you too. It's not something you need to develop or earn or deserve. It's already there, waiting beneath the layers of learned anxiety, cultural conditioning, and habitual worry. But you'll never discover it while you're busy maintaining your psychological prison, feeding your mental addictions, performing your familiar patterns of suffering. The question isn't whether you can stop worrying. You can. The question isn't whether you're capable of living without constant anxiety. You are. The question isn't whether there's life beyond the prison of mental management. There is. The only question is whether you will. Whether you'll choose freedom over familiarity, presence over projection, authentic response over anxious rehearsal. Whether you'll risk the unknown territory of peace for the known territory of worry. Whether you'll trust the intelligence that's kept you alive this long to keep guiding you without constant conscious management. Or will you continue to be the architect of your own misery, the willing participant in your own psychological imprisonment, the person who chooses familiar suffering over unfamiliar freedom? The answer reveals everything about who you really are beneath the worry, beneath the fear, beneath the desperate need to control what was never yours to control in the first place. Montaigne is waiting on the other side of surrender, not with answers, but with something far more valuable, the recognition that you never needed them. Not with solutions to your problems, but with the understanding that most of your problems were never real. Not with certainty about the future, but with peace in the present moment. The question isn't whether you can stop worrying. The question is whether you will. Everything else is just more worry disguised as wisdom, more anxiety dressed up as responsibility, more mental management masquerading as maturity. The tower is waiting. Montaigne built it for all of us, but you have to walk in alone, and you have to leave your worry at the door. Are you ready?